All right, this is day 4 of our last week of our Quarantine Home Bible Study Edition. Today I want to look at Galatians chapter 2, a parallel passage to what we read yesterday about how we as Christians consider ourselves dead to sin and alive in Christ. So if you'll turn to Galatians chapter 2, let's get started. All right, today we're going to read a nice short passage, just 2 verses. Galatians 2:20 and 21. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness can be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. Okay, so he says, I have been crucified with Christ. Okay, so he say, I have chosen to be crucified with Christ. Okay, so I have been crucified with Christ. Okay, so you say, and this is a metaphorical sense, okay? So spiritually, he considers himself crucified. He says, I no longer live, but it is Christ lives within me. So I no longer live, but Christ lives within me. Okay, so this is, again, in a sense, he's saying, I am considering my old self, that sin nature we talked about in yesterday's video. I am dead to that. I now live in Christ. Okay, so he's not saying that he's literally physically dead, because in the next sentence he says, this life I live in the body. So he's still alive, okay, physically. But this life that he lives in the body is a different kind of life, okay? It's a new life that he has found in Christ, okay? He's saying that he's, by the Son of God, he gave himself for me. He has found this new life in Christ. And he says, I do not set aside the grace of God, because if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing, okay? So this new life that he has is a product of God's grace, not the law. Okay, so one of the main themes of the book of Galatians is this idea that, are we saved by grace? What's the role of the law? How does all that work together? So Galatians is actually kind of a parallel book with Romans. And he's saying here that we are saved by grace, not the law, because if the law could save anyone, then Christ's death would mean nothing, okay? Because the law could save. Then his death meant nothing, right? If the law could save somebody. But that's not true. Jesus did come to save. So it's not by the law. We are saved by grace, okay? It's not by good works, as Ephesians says. We are saved by grace. So the new life that we have found in Christ is a result of God's grace, not our effort. But it does take that moment where we say, I am no longer living to myself, but Christ is living within me. I am rejecting the way I used to live. I am considering myself crucified with Christ, okay? That old nature, that old person who I used to be is no longer identifiable, because in my mind, that is dead. I am dead to sin. I am dead to my old way of living. And now I am living this new life that Christ has given me. So in my mind, I am crucified with Christ, and yet I live. Okay. So the idea here is a transformative, okay? The transformative nature of God's grace, that God's grace has the ability to transform people from being sinful enemies of God to being friends of God, and in his eyes, righteous. The law has never had that same kind of transformative power. The law can't save a person. It only illustrates how much a person needs grace. The law doesn't change a person. We still are sinners at heart. We still need God's grace. And so that's what Paul is saying here, is the law can't really save a person. It's God's grace. And that is where we find the hope and the new life in Jesus, is through his grace.